mountain men, voyagers, traders, priests and preachers, those who came first to break the trail, helped carve a nation from a wild and beautiful land. The native people were often impressed with the frontiersman's tools and sometimes inspired by his spiritual zeal. Here at Whitman Mission, we can see how it all began and gain insight into those whose lives helped shape the course of history. In 1831, 4 Indians rode all the way to St. Louis seeking, it is said, the white man's book of heaven and someone to teach them to read and write. One answer to that call came from the American Board of Commissioners of Foreign Missions in Boston. To the Pacific Northwest, they would send Presbyterians. Strong people were needed, such as Marcus and Narcissa Whitman, strong, yet sharing the human frailties of us all. Marcus Whitman, both doctor and missionary, took his 26-year-old bride, Narcissa, on a most remarkable honeymoon clear across primitive North America by sleigh, train, boat, wagon, and horseback. A journey never before accomplished by a white woman. They were joined en route by the Reverend Henry Harmon Spaulding, his wife Eliza, and William Gray, a carpenter. All traveled with the American Fur Company as far as the annual fur rendezvous with the Indians, held that year at Green River, Wyoming. The rest of the way led them across plains, deserts, and mountains. At Fort Laramie, Wyoming, Marcus converted a light wagon into a 2-wheeled cart. It became the first wheeled vehicle to make it across the Snake River Desert that is now southern Idaho, to be then abandoned at Fort Boise. 2 wheels, forerunner to the thousands of emigrant wagons to follow. On September 1st, 1836, the small horseback missionary band reached the Hudson's Bay Company's Fort Walla Walla on the Columbia River. Only a brief rest here, then on down the Columbia to Fort Vancouver, bustling center of Hudson's Bay Company operations in the Pacific Northwest. Here, in her New York of the Pacific, Narcissa, along with Eliza Spaulding, shopped for household necessities. Marcus and William Gray went back up the Columbia and at Waiilatpu began work on the first mission house. In the heart of Cayuse Indian country, the Waiilatpu mission was close to the lands of the much larger Nez Perce Nation. Leaving Whitman among the Cayuse, Spaulding went to establish his mission among the Nez Perce people. At Waiilatpu, comforts were few. The Whitman house was made of adobe bricks, the floor of whipsawed boards, and the leaky roof of poles covered with grass and dirt. Their bed was softened only by a mattress stuffed with corn husks. Except for a stove and a rocking chair given them by a Hudson's Bay official, their furniture was hand-wrought from the riverbank cottonwoods. Even before the house was completed, the rising river flooded it. Narcissa took the hardships cheerfully. Soon after the flooded house was rebuilt, she gave birth to a daughter, Alice Clarissa, who brightened their lives for more than 2 years. Tragically, little Alice drowned in the nearby river. After the death of their daughter, Marcus and Narcissa focused their energies harder on making the mission outpost successful. They built a second home on higher ground. Marcus, a brawny 6-footer with a great capacity for work, prepared 40 acres for planting the crops to sustain them the following year. He tended the sick among the Cayuse and also attempted to teach them reading, writing, the Christian gospel, and how to farm. A proud, haughty, nomadic people famous for their wealth in horses, the Cayuse show little aptitude for farming and not much more for the gospel. But quarreling missionaries soon hampered missionary efforts. William Gray was a complaining troublemaker. A later arrival, the highly intelligent Asa Smith fought with everybody. He did produce a refined dictionary of the Nez Perce language, and this was important. Both tribes spoke the same language. Dismayed by the constant bickering, the mission board ordered 2 of the 4 Northwest missions closed. But Marcus Whitman decided to contest the decision. After an arduous, perilous journey through deep winter snows to Boston, Whitman won a reversal. Before returning, he also visited in Washington with the Secretary of State and other prominent officials about the future of the Oregon country. Homeward bound, Whitman helped guide the largest wagon train yet to make the trek to Oregon. Soon after, the trickle of settlers was turning into a flood. Whitman could scarcely have imagined the magnetic appeal of new, unspoiled land in the West to crowded, depression-haunted citizens in the East. In a strong symbolic sense, this first wagon train was leading a populace into the Promised Land. The passing flood of settlers upset the Cayuse, who feared the emigrants might take their land. Significantly, Whitman also appeared more interested in the new settlers. He seemed resigned to the fact that the Cayuse had little interest in the ways of the white man. He devoted his energies more to medicine and less to religion. When a measles epidemic wiped out half of the Cayuse population, the Indians saw that the doctor's medicines were less effective with Indians than with the whites. They did not understand it was because the Indians had no hereditary immunity. They easily believed the false tales that charged Whitman with poisoning the Cayuse so the settlers could take the land. The ominous mood of the Cayuse was no secret. Dr. Whitman had several arguments with their chiefs. His friends repeatedly urged a move to the comparative safety of Fort Walla Walla. Also, Marcus understood the Indian tradition that held the medicine man responsible to the family of his patients. Death of the patient could mean death for the doctor. Marcus and Narcissa were determined to remain. The population of the mission was growing. On the day of retribution, it numbered 75. This chapter in the Whitman mission story had a profound effect on Oregon Territory and on the Cayuse Nation. When it was over, Narcissa and Marcus Whitman were dead. So too were 11 others. 50 were held captive at the mission settlement. Of these, 3 died of disease. 3 taken by Indians as wives were ransomed with the other captives a month later, on the arrival of a generous Hudson's Bay Company expedition and the persuasive skills of its spokesman, Peter Skeen Ogden. Other American board missions were not attacked, but they were very soon abandoned. Instead of freeing their land of settlers and wagon tracks, the Cayuse were driven into the mountains. For 2 years, they alternately ran and hid until waning energy and resources forced the surrender of 5 of their men who were tried and hanged. Congress was inspired to establish Oregon Territory, the first formal American government west of the Rocky Mountains. Marcus and Narcissa Whitman had come hand in hand onto the pages of history, inspired to serve mankind. It was their tragedy to be misunderstood, both by those they came to help and by history. Near Waiilatpu, Whitman College, one of the Northwest's finest institutions of higher learning, commemorates the Whitmans, as does this National Historic Site. On these quiet grounds, the mission site has been carefully preserved. Walk its pleasant paths. See and learn more about life on the early missionary frontiers. Visit Memorial Hill for a vista that sweeps all of the historic scene. Carry with you a bit of the spirit of Waiilatpu, then and now.